You to Ray Kisiah and telling you a little bit about why we decided to choose him as an Asheville Living Treasure. Ray Lewis Kisiah came into the world on January 21st, 1928. He was the first of 4 children born to Murdy Lou Hudson and Raymond Bartlett Kisiah. Ray remembers his childhood as a good one. He says his family was in relatively good shape during the Depression because his father was employed at the post office and had a ready salary. During the Depression, the family not only grew with another child, Donnie, but Ray's grandmother and his uncle moved in as well. Times were tough, and the family took care of each other. Sometime between 1933 and 34, Ray's father's health started to falter. He took a month's leave of absence. In a short while, the elder Kisiah had withdrawn his retirement savings, and the family moved to Florida to join a cousin in the house painting business. The business plan didn't work out, but before long the family was back in Charlotte. Ray recounts that after Florida, we moved a bit. This was a pattern that Ray took with him into adulthood. When his father got a job selling used cars, the family finally settled. They rented a place out in the country where they grew their own food. His grandfather, Pickens, had skills in the garden, and Ray was his helper. He says the garden and a couple of hogs they raised was a goodly portion of their source of food. He enjoyed living in the country. It was a great life for a kid. He used to go about a mile behind the house where there was a creek. The swimming was super. They lived there until he was in the 7th grade. Circumstances changed, and the family moved back into town, Charlotte, where Ray helped a friend with a newspaper route and delivered Liberty magazine. Ray's aunt married a fellow that bought a 70-acre tract of land, as he described it, way out towards the river. The family used to tease that it was a bad buy and would never amount to anything, but Ray loved it. Still living in Charlotte, Ray often rode his bicycle out to this place. He got to use a rifle and was expected to bring back squirrels. Are you starting to see a pattern here? Outdoors, the country, growing food, parks, bicycling, hunting, swimming. Recreation. Ray's love for his chosen field grew long before he realized it. Ray enjoyed school and was an avid reader. He excelled in high school and in college prep courses. Algebra, geometry, world history, American history, geography. He loved it all. He took a year of typing and could type 17 words a minute. At Charlotte Tech, he got to play football. After graduating high school in 1946, Ray immediately enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps, where he served in China from 1946 to 48. Once his military stint was over, he wasted no time enrolling in college. He attended UNC Charlotte from 1948 to 50. He doubled up some classes and he graduated in under 2 years. Working with the Charlotte Parks Department while he was in college, he finished his studies in March 1952, graduating from UNC Chapel Hill with a BA degree, also on the Dean's List, and then went to work for Charlotte Parks and Recreation Commission. That same year, Ray married Martha Louise Alexander. The newlyweds began their lives together in Charlotte, North Carolina, where Ray was employed with the Charlotte Parks and Recreation Commission as the Recreation Center Director and Swimming Pool Manager. In '53, he was promoted to supervisor, and Martha Ray, known as Penny, was born. In 1954, he and his young family moved to Drexel, North Carolina, where he worked as the director of Drexel Community Center. In 1956, the family moved back to Charlotte, and that's the year that Ray Lewis, known as Butch, was born. Ray served as the Assistant Superintendent and Director of Recreation for Charlotte Parks and Recreation. In 1962, the family moved to High Point, North Carolina, for Ray's new job as Director of Parks and Recreation. From 1970 to November '71, the Kisiahs lived in Boone, where Ray was employed as the General Manager of Sun Devils Resort. You're seeing a connection to his youth, right? And the moving? In November of 1971, the Kisiahs moved to Asheville. Ray served as the Director of Parks and Recreation for the city of Asheville and held the position for 22 years. He retired in 1995 as the Director of Parks and Recreation and Public Facilities for the City of Asheville. Throughout his career, Ray was an innovator in the parks and recreation field. When Ray came to Asheville, the city had 14 parks and 7 recreation centers, all of which were fairly run down. His tenacity and vision turned Asheville's rundown facilities and limited programs into a nationally recognized system. One of his first tasks was to tap the federal funding programs, urban renewal and model cities, to support the large amount of work needed to revitalize Asheville parks and recreation facilities. 3 months after becoming director, Ray asked the City Council to double his $400,000 annual budget and then found federal money. After determining that it would be less expensive to rebuild than refurbish, Ray and the city set out on an ambitious program. Spending $12 million during the next 10 years, Ray led the development of the Montford Recreation Center, expanded Weaver Park to create basketball and tennis courts, a picnic shelter, and added dugouts to the ball field. He built pools, created Mountainside Park, and a number of other recreation facilities. In addition to generating funding to help realize his vision, he encouraged and solicited the involvement of thousands of volunteers who gave their time and talents to enhance the recreational programming. This was soon followed with collaboration with Asheville City Schools and the Asheville Housing Authority to acquire the Livingston Street School and turned it into the Livingston Street Recreation Center, later to become the W.C. Reed Recreation Center. These accomplishments were followed by a methodical process over a period of many years to work with government and community partners that resulted in a major revitalization of the city's parks, including but not limited to Recreation Park, Montford Park, Murphy Oakley Park, Kenilworth Park, a new West Asheville Park, the Shiloh Recreation Center, and brought resources to the Western North Carolina Nature Center, Aston Tennis Center, McCormick Field, Municipal Golf Course, and Riverside Cemetery. Ray took lots of heat for renovating some existing parks instead of adding new ones. White residents criticized him for beginning to overhaul the park system in the city's poorer sections. Ray said, well, children need a good place to play no matter what their race. Black residents also complained he wasn't building fast enough. Reflecting on that time, Ray stated, I figured as long as I was getting shot at from both sides, I must have been doing something pretty good. He worked with the Montford Park players to create an amphitheater at the Montford Recreation Center complex, known today as the Hazel Robinson Amphitheater. This early work still lives today as a one-of-a-kind facility within Asheville's park system. It has supported the Outdoor Shakespeare Company for over 30 years. Ray takes pride in the fact that this was his first department to bring women into its senior administration in 1975. He's also proud of the corporate cooperation displayed at the time between his department and the city and county schools and sports leagues in producing programs to benefit children. Ray has a long list of volunteer service to his profession. He served on the National Recreation and Parks Board of Trustees, membership of the Public Policy, Budget, Finance, and National Issues Committee, President of American Parks and Recreation Society, President of North Carolina Recreation and Park Society, and President of the North Carolina Association of Amateur Athletics Union. He's been selected by his professional colleagues to serve in practically every leadership capacity. Ray is the author also of numerous articles in professional journals, magazines, and operations manuals. He's been a guest lecturer, speaker, panel member at numerous colleges and universities and professional recreation meetings, conferences, and training workshops. Quite a legacy. Over the years, Ray received many awards and recognitions for his contributions to the field of recreation and parks. To name just a few, in 1987, the National Distinguished Professional Award for his continuous professional experience and service in the park and recreation field from 1952 to 1995. He was also the recipient of the APRS Distinguished Fellow Award, United States Amateur Athletics Union National Recreation Man of the Year. On April 28, 1995, he was honored to receive recognition, Outstanding Commitment to the Citizens of Asheville by having a park dedicated in his name. The Ray L. Kisiah Park is located at 70 West Chapel Road, 2803. On October 5th, 1995, the Ralph C. Wilson Award was presented to Ray as the person who best exemplified Wilson's commitment to the NRPA. Ray spent an amazing 45 years in his profession. His expertise and leadership as a parks and recreation professional has left a long-lasting impact on the over 60 parks and recreation facilities in Asheville today as they continue to exist. I give you Ray L. Kisiah.
Charlie Moore.
Thank you, Carmen. I'm here to speak on behalf of Ray, but I would be very, very remiss if I did not, first of all, acknowledge and congratulate Isaac. From the period of time that I've known Isaac, I've learned that he thoroughly deserves the award being given him this afternoon. And Isaac, I learned so much more about your prior history before you came to Asheville, and that makes it even more impressive. So my congratulations to you. You may have heard Ray say, uh-oh, as I walked up here. You know, I'm a firm believer that you have serious things and you can have fun doing serious things. And Ray is rightfully worried about what I may say about him. I grew up in Asheville, and I returned to Asheville after undergraduate school and law school to begin my practice of law in 1971. And not too long after that, I joined Grace Covenant. My wife and I joined Grace Covenant Presbyterian Church, and I found that there was a church league softball team. And so I jumped into that because I loved to play softball. Played a little bit while I was in law school and undergraduate school, and really looked forward to it. And I came down to join the team and found that Ray was on the team and in fact was the coach or manager about the team. That was the first time I met Ray, and that began a close friendship that has lasted more than 40 years. Well, more than 40 years. Ray at that time, as you've already heard, was a relatively new Parks and Recreation Director in Asheville. And he certainly brought a new approach and a fresh look to Parks and Recreation in Asheville, and began the whole series of things that were read in his intro a few minutes ago. I learned quickly that I had better take directions from Ray. Not because he was Parks and Recreation Director, but because he was the coach of the softball team and I wanted to play. Our friendship grew quickly and became a friendship of mutual respect, or mutual disrespect, if you would, because we both had a good sense of humor, and we both gave each other a very hard and difficult time. It was such that even today, it is hard for me to acknowledge that he is or would be a treasure of any kind, much less when he's being honored here today. We not only played softball together, we played golf together, we became fishing buddies. We started an annual trip in September of each year up to Hazel Creek in the Smokies, where we would camp over a long weekend and fish. And Butch, Ray's son, went along on that. Both of my children went along as they were growing up, and we had an absolute blast. One of the best memories that I have about it, though, and I have to set the stage for this, I was still working very hard, still am today, in my law practice. It was harder for me to get off early than it was for Ray. I mean, after all, when you're a Parks and Recreation Director, you can take off to recreate whenever you want to. So we had a cart that we would pull up the trail to the campsite about 4 miles up a creek. And Ray had the truck, and it was the only vehicle the cart would fit into. Ray was very anxious to get out there as early as possible so he could start fishing. And I just couldn't leave that early, or at least so I told him. So So Ray would take the cart, loaded with his backpack, my backpack as well, and he would pull that cart up the trail, and I would follow, being able to walk up about 4 or 5 hours later without any weight at all on my shoulders. And I always told Ray that was because I just couldn't get off any earlier. And he believed me, I think. I was elected to City Council in 1991, and that gave me the ability, honor, and pleasure to work with Ray within the City of Asheville government. And I saw firsthand how he had taken the Asheville Parks and Recreation, which probably was languishing somewhat after the 60s, when he took over in the early 70s as the Parks and Rec Director. And he turned it into one that is an outstanding, even today, from his legacy, an outstanding Parks and Recreation Department for the benefit of the City of Asheville. He developed it and turned it into, and I can say this honestly, I think the finest Parks and Rec department in the country. In fact, he achieved accreditation for the Asheville Parks and Rec, and it was the first one in the country to be fully accredited. What is it, by the National Parks and Recreation Association, Ray? He began his participation in the national scene during his tenure in Asheville, and he was recognized by his peers. He became president of the American Parks and Recreation Society. He received numerous national honors that you have heard mentioned already. It was a sad day, certainly to me, I think a sad day for the City of Asheville when Ray retired. But I know Ray retired to do all the other things that he was doing, which definitely included and continues to include recreation. When he retired, he left the city in very good hands. He had trained the staff, he had brought the staff along, he had developed the staff, and turned over authority and responsibility to the staff throughout his career. And the successors to Ray, Irving Brinson, who is here today, was another outstanding Parks and Rec director, following in Ray's legacy, and as a result, I'm positive of Ray's influence on him. His son Butch became a Parks and Rec director in Chapel Hill and retired not too long ago, and is himself enjoying retirement. When you look at Ray's career and when you look at his accomplishments, he is indeed a treasure. And yeah, Ray, I guess I'm going to acknowledge publicly, you are a living treasure for Asheville. And I'm glad I can emphasize the word living as well.
Would you like to come up and say over?
I was around when Ray started his career with the city. Ben Horton was the city manager. In fact, I think it was the day he was either interviewed or hired for the job that I met him. Ray made the Asheville Parks and Recreation Department a classic example for other communities to follow. He surrounded himself with a great staff. We gave the department more expanded names through the years as Ray took on more and more responsibilities. Ray was a master at obtaining the maximum available from the city ad valorem tax, and he could stretch those dollars into millions of state and federal grants to make capital improvements and provide broader recreation programs for our community. Local, regional, state, national, Ray Kisiah's name is synonymous with the title Grandfather of Recreation. And he has numerous awards to prove it, like the special recognition he's receiving today. Those past and present awards show in words and trophies his faithfulness to the public service of recreation. Of course, knowing Martha and their relationship, I give her a lot of credit for giving him her guidance and giving him the time that he needed to become what he became. I'll leave off listing the most prestigious awards, since I assumed those were covered. I'll be glad to come back in case we missed one or two. There is a park that bears his name. Very nice park. Now, Ray does have some unusual traits. Couldn't pass this up. For those of you that know him, you can relate to this. Ray called me a few weeks ago and told me about this special recognition that he was going to receive. And he asked me to say a few words, but not to talk more than 3 minutes. Now, how many of you know Ray? Then you know that if you ask Ray to speak for 3 minutes, that he would only be warming up after about 10. That's why we never let him be a witness in court. And in some circles, Asheville Aquatic Club and our department head meetings, we refer to him as the late Mr. Kisiah. Ray is one of the most personable individuals that I have ever met and worked with. Ray, I want to thank you for the opportunity to have worked with you for most of your career in the city of Asheville. Now, I can't sit down without saying a few words about Isaac. I got to know Isaac when he started his career with the city. Isaac, in my opinion, is Mr. Even-tempered. You enjoy being in his company. Isaac worked great with people at all levels of government and the community at large. Isaac, my congratulations to you on receiving this special recognition today. Now, if both of you would, raise your right hand and put it over your shoulder like this and pat yourself on the back. After this is all over, we're going to pat you on the back ourselves.
Okay, we have another speaker, and I could not read your name, but Irby?
Irby. You got it.
Charlie, I for one was glad when Ray retired. It is an honor to be here today because I know Isaac and I've known Ray for many, many years. 45 years in the Parks and Recreation profession that Ray put in, tremendous. And it's hard to believe that I had the opportunity to work for him. There is a quote that's on Jackie Robinson's grave that I've only used one other time. That was at my father's funeral. It said, "A life is not important except for the impact that it has on others." And I can say, without a doubt, the impact that Ray had on the citizens of Asheville in his tenure here was tremendous. We've heard about his ability to take $1 and to turn it into $100. And I'm not going to go over the projects that he went through, and Dick Meehan is back there, can testify better than I can about how he could pull a rabbit out of a hat and make things happen. But I do think that there are a couple of things that you probably don't know about in Ray's career that I think left a lasting impact. Our summer playground program that was started with Ray was free. And it meant so much, especially to the children in our inner city, to have a place to go between 9 and 5 every day that was safe, secure, their parents could rest assured that things were going okay, that nothing was going to happen. That, to me, is a legacy that will live on forever. Because so many of you, a lot of you probably sitting out here went through that summer playground program or had children that went through that program. The other thing is that Ray did a Learn to Swim program, and I think it's still going on. No charge, totally free. And his thought process with that, if I can teach one child to learn to swim, that he has an opportunity not only to save his life, but also to save somebody else's life. You know, you think about the impact, you can see the physical impacts in our community with the facilities that we have, and they are fine facilities. And I had the honor of working with him during that time. But I think the impact that he had on our community with those things that you really don't see a lot of, that really did leave our community a better place. I mentioned national accreditation. Something was left out that Ray actually sat on the commission forming that. He was one of the founding fathers of the accreditation program. And yes, Asheville was one of the first. We were the first municipal department accredited. And the only reason we were is because Ray came to a staff meeting and said, we're going to be a pilot agency. And we did it. We didn't know what we were doing. We had no clue. We didn't know what accreditation, half of us couldn't even spell it. But we went through the program, and I can honestly say that one program helped my career more than anything. My ability to be able to travel to other communities, participate, to learn the new ideas, to bring back to our staff, to help improve our staff. Those are the things that I cherish from that, and it would never have happened without Ray. Now, Ray is competitive. Those that have played golf with him know that's the case. And Ray does not say a lot of cuss words. In fact, if you can get a geese out of him or oh Ray after he hits a bad shot, that's his way of cussing. But I do remember one time when he did let it loose. And Martha, I'm sorry about this. I was coming back from lunch and I heard Ray, very rarely, he was saying some bad words. So I stopped in and I said, Ray, is everything all right? He said, Martha just drove my van underneath the parking deck. And it had an extended roof on it. I said, what she did, she didn't stop back up. She just said, well, if I've hit it, I'll go on. And took it completely off. But Martha, Ray did back into the garage door at City Hall and broke it too.
I'm glad to know that.
Yeah, he didn't tell you about that.
No.
I would say from a personal standpoint that Ray hired me right out of college, went to the outstanding university at North Carolina State, and he saw something in me that, I really didn't see in myself. He gave me plenty of opportunities to learn, to put myself out there in situations where I was not very comfortable with. But I think Ray saw something early on that there's potential here for this young man. And I appreciate that. I would say, too, that Ray's been more than a boss to me. He's been a good friend. Without him, I can think of my parents and my wife and Ray Kisiah as the people that have really formed my career. And I'm indebted to that, Ray. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Dot Sulak, the speaker, right?
I'll be real quick. It's so wonderful being here and hearing about both of these people. So amazing. I just want to say that when you think about recreation, it sounds kind of like fun and sort of fluffy, and of course it is. But as an educator, I want to say that TV is really dumb. Video games are often bad. People say, what will my children do? You don't want them watching TV and playing video games all the time. You want them outside. You want them in recreation. It's good for education and it's good for health. And so there's nothing light or fluffy about this only. It's really, really important.
Hello, I'm John Kisiah, Ray's youngest son. And I'd like to tell y'all a brief story to help pull these two great men's history together. I want to tell you a brief story of what my father was doing during the Civil Rights Movement, quietly doing. If you were to take us back to, let me take us back to the high point, when my father was the Parks and Recreation Director. A few months before, there had been deadly riots in Greensboro, which is only 30 miles away. But you never heard of the great, horrible race riots that happened in High Point. My father is part of the reason for that. What he quietly did was, when it was time to integrate the pools, my father had, the Ku Klux Klan was involved. They were threatening deadly violence to any person of color who tried to use the public pools. So what my father did is he got together with the NAACP, and I think it was a Wednesday morning, he had two young ladies of color come to the pool. And they were there for like an hour. They had their swim, and then they left. By the time the protesters got there, it was over. They were gone. Yeah? Then the next week, on a different day of the week, he had two young men come in of color. They came, they swam for an hour, and then they left. This happened a few more times, and the pool became integrated, and it was a non-issue. I'm so proud of my father. Thank you very much.
I think Hazel Robinson would like to say a few words.
Yes.
Wait for it.
Hi, I'm Hazel Robinson, and together Ray and I started Sponsored Bar Players. That's because we needed a place to play if we were going to start it. And after he said yes, then I thought, I bet he has a good voice, good presence. This was in the third year, mind you. We were already there. But I thought, we need a little more publicity. And the city could use some notice to the park. I will ask him if he wouldn't like to try out. There's this little part in Taming of the Shrew, at the very beginning, the prologue. And if you tack on the previous play of The Taming of a Shrew,